possible to please God. But without faith, it is impossible to please God.
Bethel kids, I'm Drea.
And I'm Caleb, and we're really excited that you're joining us today.
Yeah, today's a special day because today is Mother's Day. So make sure you show your mom how much you love her.
Also, it's exciting because today we get to learn about Joshua in the Bible and how he did all these amazing things to show his faith to God.
Yeah, but before we do that, let's get started by singing some songs.
All right, let's do it. All right, let's sing Lord, I lift your name on high. Lord, I lift your name on high. Lord, I love to sing your praises. I'm so glad you're in my life. I'm so glad you came to save us. You came from heaven to earth to show the way, from the earth to the cross. My debt to pay, from the cross to the grave, from the grave to the sky. Lord, I lift your name on high. One more time. Lord, I lift your name on high. Lord, I love to sing your praises. I'm so glad you're in my life. I'm so glad you came to save us. Sing it out. You came from heaven to earth to show the way, from the earth to the cross. My debt to pay, from the cross to the grave, from the grave to the sky. Lord, I lift your name on high. Lord, I lift your name on high.
Who brings the power
Of sin and darkness,
whose love is mighty
and so much stronger, the King of glory, the King above all kings, who shakes the whole earth with holy thunder and leaves us breathless in awe and wonder, the King of glory, the King above all kings. This is amazing grace. This is unfailing love, that you would take my place, that you would bear my cross. You laid down your life, that I would be set free. Oh, Jesus, I sing for all that you've done for me. Who brings our chaos back into order, who makes the orphan a son and daughter, the King of glory, the King of glory, who rules the nations with truth and justice, shines like the sun in all of its brilliance, the King of glory, the King above all kings. This is amazing grace. This is unfailing love, that you would take my place, that you would bear my cross. You laid down your life, unfailing love, that you would take my place, that you would bear my cross. You laid down your life, that I would be set free. Oh, Jesus, I sing for all that you've done for me.
The Faithful Hall of Fame, Joshua. This is Joshua. Joshua was an Israelite who followed Moses through the wilderness.
1, 2, 3, here we go. Oh, yeah.
Joshua learned from Moses as Moses led the Israelites through the Red Sea. And as Moses taught the people about God's law.
I see.
Everyone, listen up.
One day, Moses was talking to the Israelites. He was reminding them of the law and all that God had done for them.
Yeah.
Now, see here, all you.
When Moses had finished giving instructions to the people, he said, I am no longer able to lead you.
Hold on.
Do not be afraid, for God will neither fail you nor abandon you.
Yeah.
Then Moses called Joshua
Me?
and told him to be strong and courageous, for he would lead the Israelites into the promised land.
See?
Then Moses died. To this day, no one knows exactly where he was buried. The people and all of Israel mourned. The people of Israel looked to Joshua to lead them, as Moses had told them.
There he is. Yeah.
God told Joshua to be strong and courageous, for he would be with Joshua wherever he went. He told him to remember what Moses had told him and to study the book of instruction. God told Joshua that it was time to lead the people of Israel across the Jordan River and into the promised land.
Okay, here we are.
Joshua told the Israelite officials to go throughout the camp.
Out there.
They instructed everyone to pack up and get ready to head out.
Come on.
Joshua told the Israelites they were going to cross the Jordan River.
See here. There's what we're going to do, okay?
And so, Joshua prepared to lead his people as the Lord had commanded. This is Joshua.
Hello.
Joshua was the leader of the Israelites, who God would use to take his people into the promised land.
Yeah, let's do it.
Joshua readied his people to cross the Jordan River, which was the only thing dividing the Israelites from the land that God had promised to them.
All right.
Right here. Okay.
They camped beside the river for 3 days, waiting, just as the Lord had commanded them. At this time of year, the Jordan River was flooded and flowing with so much water that it was impossible to cross on foot.
And then the Lord said, let there be light.
Hey, priest.
Yes.
Come on.
God told Joshua to tell the people that the priests would carry the Ark of the Covenant and lead the people through the water. He told the priests to step into the rushing waters,
Wait. Huh?
and when they would do this, the waters would stop flowing.
All right.
And as soon as the priests did this, the water of the Jordan River did stop flowing.
Yeah.
And the priests stood with the Ark of the Covenant on dry ground as the Israelites crossed to the other side.
All right.
God told Joshua to send 12 men from the 12 tribes of Israel
Go get it.
to take 12 stones from the place that the priests were standing. When all this had been finished as God commanded, Joshua called the priests from the Jordan.
We're good. Come on.
As their feet left the Jordan River, the waters came back into place, just as they had been.
Wow! Yeah!
They brought their stones to their camp and set them as a memorial, so future generations might remember the story of how God brought his people through the Jordan River on dry ground. Now the Israelites had crossed the Jordan and were camped near the town of Jericho.
Hello!
One day Joshua looked up,
Huh?
and there was a man standing before him.
Hello?
The man said, "I am the commander of the army of the Lord." Joshua asked what the man wanted to tell him, and the Lord said he wanted Joshua to take the city of Jericho,
Alright,
but that Joshua needed to follow his instructions exactly.
you got it.
Jericho was shut for fear of the Israelites.
And went home? Yeah, well.
No one came out and no one came in. So the Lord told Joshua to gather his soldiers and march around the city for 6 days.
Mark!
The priests were to take the Ark of the Covenant, and 7 priests were to go in front of it, blowing a ram's horn. On the 7th day, they were to march around the city 7 times and blow the horn. Then all the people of Israel were to give a great shout,
Then what?
and then the city walls would fall.
Whoa! Yeah, let's do it!
So Joshua said, "Shout, for the Lord has given you the city." And the people did shout. And the walls did fall.
Let's go!
The Israelites overtook the city of Jericho as God had commanded.
Rahab!
They remembered Rahab because of her faithfulness. Joshua was faithful in carrying out God's commands, and the Israelites took many other cities as God told them they would.
Oh, nice!
For God will never fail to fulfill his promises. So the Israelites came to live in the land that God had promised Abraham, Isaac, Israel, Joseph, and Moses many years ago.
Kids, it's so good to be tuned in with you today. And wow, wasn't that an amazing story that we just heard about Joshua? Well, today I have a question for you. Have you ever looked up to someone? Maybe it was a Sunday school teacher, your pastor, a sports coach, or maybe your parents? Someone that you would be around a lot and look up to and learn from. What would you call this person? This person would be your role model. Well, you know, Joshua had a role model too, and his name was Moses. You remember Moses, right? We learned about him last week, and he was the baby who was hid in the basket, grew up in Egypt, and led the Israelites. Well, Joshua was right next to Moses as he led the Israelites. Well, Moses told the Israelites that when he died, Joshua would become the next leader. And he told Joshua, don't be afraid, don't be scared, because God will be with you. So have courage. So years went by, and Moses eventually died, and all the children of Israel cried and mourned and were sad over the loss of Moses. But they remembered Joshua, and they remembered that he would be the next leader. That's a lot of responsibility, right? But God told Joshua that he would never leave him nor forsake him. In fact, God would be with Joshua every step of the way. Even when Joshua was nervous, God reminded him of what Moses said. And God told Joshua to study the covenant. And that's exactly what Joshua did faithfully. And today we're going to look at 3 times Joshua had faith in God. 1, we see faith in waiting. Just as we just learned, Joshua had faith in the first part of his life. As he grew up, he followed and learned from Moses. He wasn't at home playing video games all night, watching TV, sitting on the couch eating chips. He followed the authority that God placed in his life. And that's exactly what you can do too, just like Joshua. You may ask, how can I be like Joshua? Well, I think if Joshua were here today, he'd say, you can obey your parents, you could obey your Sunday school teachers, and you could obey your pastor. And just like that, you can have faith in waiting, just like Joshua. Secondly, we see faith in water. How many of you guys like to go swimming? I know I do, especially when it's hot, the sun's out, and all you want to do is eat a popsicle and get into some cold water. That sounds so nice, right? Well, there is a river called the Jordan River, and this river was huge and full of water. But you couldn't go swimming in this river. Why? Well, the rapids were so fast and the current was so high that it would be impossible for someone to go into the water and be alive. Well, when Joshua was leader, God told him to take the Israelites and the Ark of the Covenant across the Jordan River. What? That's crazy, right? Why would God want them to do that? Well, God told Joshua on the other side of the river would be the promised land, a land that's like paradise. So Joshua took all the Israelites, told them to pack up, and they were going to travel to the Jordan River. And by the Jordan River, they camped there for 3 days and 3 nights, just like God commanded them. And then Joshua called the priests that were carrying the Ark of the Covenant, and he told them that God said, step into the water, and they would cross on dry ground. And the priests, they were kind of nervous, they were kind of scared, because they knew if someone stepped into the river, the current would take them. So they brushed off a little bit, they shook themselves off, and then they did it. They stepped into the Jordan River, and as soon as their foot hit the ground, the waters dried up, just like God had said. And by faith, they crossed the Jordan River on dry ground. And as they were crossing, Joshua stopped 12 men from the 12 tribes of Israel and told them to pick up stones from the river. And in the middle of the Jordan River, they made a memorial, praising God and giving God glory for his protection and the promise that he kept. So as they crossed, the priests finally stepped out of the river, and as soon as they crossed, the waters were filled back into the river. Isn't that amazing? You see, just like God told Joshua to cross the Jordan River, God tells us to follow commands too. What are some commands that God gives us? Well, God tells us that we are to love him with all of our heart, all of our soul, and all of our mind. How could we do that? Well, we could read our Bible every day to hear from him. And God also tells us to pray without ceasing, whether it's before you eat, before you go to bed at night, or any time throughout the day, you can pray to God. You can also share the gospel. Share what Jesus has done in your life with your family or with your friends, and tell others of what he has done for you. These are some ways that we can be like Joshua and have faith in following God. So first, we see have faith in waiting. Secondly, we see faith in water. And lastly, we see faith in walking. So the Israelites had just crossed the Jordan River, and they saw God do this incredible miracle. And they were one step closer to the promised land. Well, God told Joshua it was time to take over the city named Jericho. So Joshua sent 2 spies into Jericho. And in Jericho, there was a woman named Rahab. And Rahab protected those 2 spies that Joshua had sent from the enemies and the bad guys that were looking for them. And the spies were so grateful to Rahab that they promised her that they would keep her and her family safe. So God told Joshua how he wanted the Israelites to take over Jericho. And this was their game plan. He told them to walk around Jericho for 6 days. while carrying the Ark of the Covenant, and he wanted the priests to blow the ram's horn. So they did. And on the 7th day, they were to walk around the walls 7 times. And at the end, the people were to give a huge shout. So they shouted, for the Lord had given them the city. And when they did that, the walls of Jericho, the massive walls that surrounded the city, came crumbling down. And the Israelites took over Jericho. But remember Rahab? So did they. And they found Rahab and her family and protected her because of her faithfulness. And Joshua was faithful to carry out God's plan. After this, the Israelites began to take over city after city, just as God had promised them. You see, God never fails his promises. The Israelites began to live in the land that God had promised Abraham, Isaac, Israel, and Joseph, and Moses in the generations before. And I have some awesome news for you today. In our generation, God still fulfills his promises to you and to me. You can have faith just like Joshua did. You can have faith in waiting. You can have faith in water, and you can have faith in walking. Remember what God told Joshua? And he tells us today, "Have I not commanded thee? Be strong and of a good courage." And I hope you can do that too.
Hey there, Bethel kids. It's Brother Mawan here, and I just want to give you a memory verse for this week. It's Joshua 1:9a, and it says, "Have not I commanded thee? Be strong and of a good courage." I know right now during this troubled time with the coronavirus going around that it can cause us to worry, it can cause us to maybe struggle in school and stuff. But I just want to encourage you with this verse to just be strong and of a good courage, and really to just trust God in this trying time. So remember, our verse for this week is Joshua 1:9. "Have not I commanded thee? Be strong and of a good courage." And once you memorize that verse and you feel like you've gotten it down, please send us a video of you saying that verse so we can upload it and show it on our YouTube channel. Thank you so much for joining us today, and take care.
Hey Bethel kids, we had a lot of fun with you guys today.
Yeah, and don't you think it was awesome how Joshua would be brave enough to lead God's people to the promised land?
Yeah, it's amazing how he did that. And that's why our memory verse this week is Joshua 1:9, where God says to be strong and of good courage.
Yeah, I love that verse. So Bethel kids, I challenge you this week to memorize that verse, Joshua 1:9. And once you do, send us a video and we'll feature you on next week's episode.
All right, we'll see you guys next week where we'll learn about our last person in the Faithful Hall of Fame.
Yep.
All right, see you next week.
Bye.